the skewing of history, the strangling of truth, the skewing of the minds of America's most vulnerable, the youth. That's the topic of today's Bold and Blunt, and I'm your host, Cheryl Chumley, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. And I want to quickly remind you that you can now get Bold and Blunt at edify.app/podcast. That is the online platform to go to if you're looking for faith-based podcasts. And who doesn't need a little faith in today's dark Joe Biden times? You can also get Bold and Blunt, of course, at WashingtonTimes.com. You can subscribe to my newsletter there at WashingtonTimes.com. It comes out 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And it contains all my weekly commentaries, all my daily commentaries that I write all day long at the Washington Times, as well as my twice weekly Bold and Blunt podcasts. And you can also get Bold and Blunt, of course, as you probably already are aware, anywhere fine podcasts are offered. And before I get into my show, I want to give a quick mention. My new book, Lockdown, The Socialist Plan to Take Away Your Freedom, is now out. Get your copy, Books A Million, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, anywhere fine books are offered, and find out all the underreported, unreported, and behind-scenes discussions that took place among those of the left and globalist movement to justify locking down the American people. And more importantly, find out what's in store, what the left has in store next from the coronavirus to continue locking down the American people. It's a book you don't want to miss. It will drive the globalists crazy if you read it and educate yourself and arm yourself for the big battle that's coming. So skewing the truths of American history, skewing the truths to the point where we're deceiving the next generation of American leaders. The public school systems, without a doubt, disaster. But you know what? So is this White House. Listen to this.
What are the next things that are going to be attacked? Because this MAGA crowd is really the most extreme political organization that's existed in American history.
Is it really? MAGA, Make America Great Again, supporters of Donald Trump, America First type patriotic Americans? The most extreme political organization that's existed in American history, so says our President of the United States, Joe Biden. Well, that's so untrue. If you look at, say, the Weather Underground, right? The Weather Underground was a radical organization that sprang out of the 60s, existed through the 70s. And what did they do? They bombed more than 25 government buildings. Why? Because they were upset about the Vietnam War. They were upset about what they perceived is wrong and egregious acts on the part of government. They were social justice campaigners. And so because they felt their cause was right, they went forth and just bombed the heck out of government buildings. At its height in the 1970s, I'm reading now from a piece in The Hill, written just a few days ago, entitled, What Was the Weather Underground? At its height in the 1970s, the Weather Underground was responsible for at least 25 bombings of government buildings, including at the Capitol and the Pentagon. Look, this is Joe Biden's lifetime. He doesn't even have to go back that far. But more than just a gang responsible for a string of explosions, The Hill writes. The group was a tight-knit revolutionary organization promoting social change. Skipping ahead a bit, still reading from this Hill piece, the Weather Underground began as a militant formation within the Students for a Democratic Society, SDS. Where do we hear that phrase now? Democratic Socialists, Democratic Society, Progressive Democrat. It's all one and the same. It's Marxism, right? So it started within the SDS, one of the largest left-wing organizations in the 1960s that pushed for an end to the Vietnam War. And guess what the group's stated mission was? Its overall theme for being, its reason for existence. And this is a quote, to dismember and dispose of U.S. imperialism. That's what the Hill reports, right? I'll read right from the piece. In a 1969 manifesto titled after the Dylan line, Bob Dylan, I assume, the group detailed their primary intention, quote, to dismember and dispose of U.S. imperialism. Members in 1970 actually signed a declaration of war against the U.S. government. Unbelievable. And they had their days of rage in October 1969 during a protest that the group organized in Chicago. A bronze statue of a policeman was bombed at a Chicago park, the Hill wrote, but otherwise the group was thwarted in causing more mayhem. More than 120 protesters were arrested and criminal charges were filed against all the top leaders of Weather Underground. The following year, the group attempted to bomb facilities in Detroit and Fort Dix, New Jersey. Thank goodness for the FBI. They foiled some of the group's plots. And here's the what goes around comes around moment for the group. On March 6th, the Weather Underground accidentally detonated its own bombs in a townhouse in New York, killing 3 members of the group. After the deaths, the Hill writes, the group pledged to carry out non-fatal bombings, promising to first telephone the buildings of their bombing targets, to give people a chance to exit the building, stage right before they bombed. How helpful, how very helpful. I guess that's how Joe Biden dismisses this factual bit of history about this radical group as being not as radical as the MAGA movement, not as radical. You know, what about the KKK or the new Black Panther Party? No, in Joe Biden's mind, it's MAGA. It's MAGA that's the most radical, that is the most needful in being watched by the government, in which members are most worthy of being arrested and jailed, without charges, without due process. It doesn't matter because, after all, MAGA is the most radical political organization in American history. You don't even have to go back that far to see that Joe Biden's statement, his rhetoric, his claim is completely untrue. Look at Antifa. Good Lord. For months, this nation was held hostage to the next Antifa movement, to the next Antifa takeover of city streets and establishment of no police zones, to the next campaign of broken glass and firebombed police cars.
What are the next things that are going to be attacked? Because this MAGA crowd is really the most extreme political organization that's existed in American history.
I just can't believe that he can seriously stand there this week with a serious face and make that contention. And the media just sits there, oh yes, Mr. President, yes, Mr. President. You are so correct, Mr. President. It's all about MAGA mayhem in America. MAGA is at the root of all evils in America. The takeaway, of course, is that you, as a fine, upstanding member of the MAGA mindset, are supposed to be ashamed and silenced out of fear of being persecuted from putting your views forth in the public arena now. You're supposed to be cowed because Joe Biden has deemed you with the pro-America, you with the support Donald Trump, you with the make America great again, you with the America first mindset. You are declared the most extreme in American history. You could go back in time and make a case that the original Tea Party was more extreme than MAGA. But this is Joe Biden after all. You can't fault a man whose mind is gone, right? The guy's deranged. Let's be real. He's not thinking for himself. He's only spitting out what's stuffed in his mind. He's like a computer model, right? You input the data and it spits out what it was told to spit out. That's our president. The danger, though, is when viewpoints like this are fed into the minds of America's next generation of leaders. And that is exactly what's happening in today's public school systems. My guest today, Sam Sorbo, you all know her, Hollywood actress. Before that, biomedical engineering student at Duke University, then turned model. Now she spends her time fighting hard, fighting fast and furious for our nation's youth because she sees the threat, the danger, the peril that our public school systems have become to America's children. And she's turned all her intelligence and her activism and her vigor and determination toward the public education system in America. And she has some novel ideas on how to save our children, our emerging leaders, from the propaganda that has bled into the public school system, teaching our next generation to hate America, to hate all that America stands for, and to love and embrace socialism, Marxism, collectivism. Sam Sorbo has seen this threat, and instead of just sitting at home crying about it, she's come up with a range of solutions for parents to save their children from the government-run schools. Sam, thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here with you.
So let's talk about this underground education playbook for home learning conference that you have in the works. What is it, and how can people attend?
So the playbook for home learning is basically a new blueprint for parents who have figured out that the education system is now actively against their children and against them. Or maybe they just figured out that they really should explore other options because of what's happening in the schools today. And I'm offering this playbook as a way, as a guidebook. It's a workbook and a notebook for the conference, but it's the guidebook that they will then be able to take home with them, because our whole education system has taught us basically that we are incapable of teaching our children. And nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, we are each uniquely gifted for teaching our children if you understand education in its proper context. But we don't even understand education anymore because of what the school system has done. So I have a term that I've started using for people, and that term is school injured. We've all been injured by the school in some way, shape, or form, and so what I'm going to do is sort of unpack all of this and walk people through how we ought to be looking at education. And what's great about it is once you see it, once you figure it out, it makes perfect sense because it's the truth. And then you go back and you go, oh my gosh, I can't believe I've been so deceived. But there's a great deception that's going on, and that is what the schools have been complicit in since, well, for a very long time now.
I love this. I love this because, first, it's so timely. We've seen the pushback by parents in recent times against what their school children have been learning, due mostly because parents have seen firsthand what their kids are learning because of the stay-at-home orders from the coronavirus. But I love this, too, because I think there are so many parents in America who would love to homeschool, but they just don't feel as if they're equipped to do it. So when is your conference, and where is it, and how can people attend?
So it's June 24 and 25 in Port St. Lucie. I will be recording it, so it should be available online at some date after that, but I'm really hoping that people come in person because there's a lot of conversation that happens when I'm talking about these subjects. It's not enough to sit and be lectured at. That's one of the failings of our education system, is that we treat children like little birds, and the teacher just puts the food in their mouth. And that is not the way education happens. And so I have conversations with my audiences so that so that they can also reach the conclusions that I'm trying to bring them to. It's more of a Socratic method than your traditional professor to students kind of relationship. And so we picked Port St. Lucie. It's a beautiful area. It's close to where I live, so that made it really easy. And I'm very excited because I've gotten so much interest, and even from people who don't have kids, they want to know what I'm talking about with this idea of education, because we all have these presumptions that are assumed from our time in school. But we haven't been educated. We've been schooled, and it's a completely different thing. And Cheryl, the evidence, of course, is abundant, especially now with COVID, because we've been trained to not ask questions. And so we went very quickly from 2 weeks to flatten the curve, which did make perfect sense. We didn't know what we were dealing with. That seemed to be the prudent choice. But then we just morphed into slow the spread. And there were very few people who were saying, what about speed the spread? What did we even consider that? No, we just all said, trust the experts. And of course, now we see where that's gotten us. And so we have to go back and revamp sort of all of our assumptions about education, especially now that we see that the schools are so detrimental for children. I mean, the masking policies that the schools put through that were only detrimental for the children, not helpful at all. And it's the first time in history that the older generation has imposed terrible restrictions and impediments to the younger generation for their own preservation, for the preservation of the older generation. Typically, the older generation is the sacrificing generation for the younger generation, for their progeny, but not in this case. This is a terrible statement about the state of our cultural society in the United States today. And of course, that is all a product of our education system.
Going back to what you said about that there are certain presumptions that adults have been conditioned to believe in how their children's education should go forth. I'm willing to bet that one of the assumptions many would-be homeschooling parents make is that they're not educated enough, that they don't have a master's degree in education, and they don't feel qualified to teach their kids, especially in high school. So address that point and what you would respond to that.
Oh my gosh, so it's such a great point, and the easiest way to address that is you're probably right, and for that reason you have to say the school is at fault because the school did not properly prepare you, right?
Right.
In which case, why would you send your child back to that?
Good point.
Right? So let's just think logically instead of just a knee-jerk reaction of, oh, I guess I just have to send my kid to school because that's the way it's always been. If the school failed you, why would you think that the school would do a better job with your child? I had somebody argue with me the other day, well, I was bullied in school and it made me a stronger person. Really? That's your argument for putting your child in school? I mean, the arguments for putting your children in school are so absurd and off topic, and they're not consequent to the actual discussion. In other words, one of the big arguments is, well, what about socialization? Well, I'm sorry, number one, that's not education, and that's not why you send your child to school, right? The reason that your child goes to school is to get an education. Socializing is a completely separate thing, and really shouldn't have anything to do with your decision, frankly, because your decision should be based entirely, first and foremost, on education. But secondarily, what makes you think that socialization happens properly in the school? schools are rampant with bullying now. Is that proper socialization? What are you hoping for your child? That they be bullied, well or not well, or I don't know what. Like, we're not even thinking things all the way through, and that is the result of having attended public school, because we weren't taught how to think. We were just taught what to think, and that's a dead end. It's like whole word reading, which is something that they put through in the 60s in schools without any testing. They just decided, frankly, between you and me, Cheryl, they needed to sell more books. So let's revamp the entire way that we teach reading to children, and we'll go off the phonics system and just teach whole word reading, because somebody somewhere said this was a good thing to do. And so they created a whole bunch of new books so that the kids could learn whole word reading. It severely limited their reading skills. Severely. It was a complete disaster. They reversed it a decade later. In the meantime, they abused all of those children in school without so much as an apology, and textbook manufacturers made a whole bunch of money. So if you think for some reason that the institution has the best interests of your child at heart, I'm just telling people they're wrong if they think that, because all the evidence proves that that's the wrong way to think about it.
Now, your campaign, your viewpoint, it's a bold stance that comes at a time where there are a lot of conservatives, a lot of Christians even, that saying that are more campaigning for a reform of the public school system, most notably by having, say, Christians and conservatives run for school board seats in their local communities and take back the school systems that way. But you go a step beyond that, and your viewpoint now is that the public school systems are unreformable. They cannot be saved. So tell people what kind of response are you receiving from that, and how practical do you see your viewpoint? Do you see your campaign versus one of reform?
Well, before we just sort of tie that with a bow, the reason that I say that trying to reform the schools is a losing battle, which is what I say. And I support parents who want to make that battle. If you want to go in and oust the school board and put conservatives on the school board and change the teachers out, I'm all for that. But at the same time, take your children off the front lines. They don't have that time to wait until you can be successful.
Right.
They are being injured today, right?
Right.
Take the kids off the front line. But second to that, the reason that I don't believe that ultimately it will be successful is because we are here based on where we were when good people used to sit on the school boards and good teachers used to teach in the schools. And the reason that we are here from there is because the entire paradigm of school is injurious to the child. It is not a winning paradigm. It's a perversion of education. And in fact, today, it is anti-education. And if you don't believe me, please come to my conference, because I will make the case, and it's undeniable. When I run you through all the specifics of the things that we see in our schools and the way schools are run, I will prove to you that school is anti-education, and the last place you want a child to be is in an institution like that.
Is it your view that any parent can successfully homeschool their child? Do you see success from all walks of life?
Oh, absolutely. I've seen a tremendous success. It's a different mindset. However, I don't call it homeschool, because the failures that I see are the parents that try to do public school at home. It's the highest attrition rate. People drop out left, right, and center because it's such a negative. And in fact, I know many teachers who are dropping out of the system because they can't take it anymore, because it is so injurious to the child. So the last thing you want to do is quote unquote homeschooling the way that our current culture understands that word. And that's why I talk about a completely different approach, and it is not nearly as labor intensive as people assume homeschooling is, and it's much more rewarding. So and much more successful in the long run. So to that end, yes, I believe that this is really the best solution for families.
And just to wrap up with one final question, you're not just advocating this out of the blue. This is something that you've done in your own family. Can you talk about your own experiences with teaching your own children, with not sticking them in the public school systems?
Yeah, so I pulled my oldest after second grade. I pulled him from public school because the public school simply wasn't serving him. He was a good kid. They used him in the classroom, and I felt like I could fail at homeschooling and still end up with something better than what they were sort of creating or working toward. So I pulled him out. I did have second thoughts. I put him back in a small school a year and a half later. That was also disastrous, and I pulled him out after 6 weeks again. So I've tried, sort of being in the institution. And then it took me almost a decade of raising my children and educating them at home to finally figure out and also I will say doing the TV show that I did on Epic TV to finally sort of unravel the mess that was made in my head, in the heads of are basically the cultural thought patterns that have been created by the institution. And that's why now I'm so fervent in my views, because it's so detrimental. It's the opposite of anything that we are desirous of. If we are good parents, if we're loving parents. So yeah, I've walked this path. I would do it differently. I would do it even more so because of all of what I've learned over the years. My third child taught me an enormous lesson. Your children are there to teach you just like you're there to teach them. It's a reciprocal relationship, and it's something that's absolutely beautiful. And the thing that I try to do for parents is cast a vision. So just briefly, I go to bed early often when my husband's traveling. I'll just be in my bed with my computer getting some work done. And on various occasions, several times, my teenagers, each individually, would come into my bedroom late at night just to download their day, just to talk. Because that is the kind of relationship that you can aspire to when you do home learning, which is different than the narrative of the culture, which typically, the typical response to, I have 3 teenagers, is a rolling of the eyes and a shrugging of the shoulders and sort of commiseration. Oh man, I feel your pain. And I always say, I don't know what you're talking about. My kids and I have a phenomenal relationship. I'm so enamored of my children, and they're so respectful of me, and they teach me, and they know that they can teach me things, but they also know that I can teach them a great deal. And so we have this relationship that's fostered with the home learning paradigm that is totally destroyed by the school system. That's why, Cheryl, I call it the greatest heist in human history. What the schools have done to families, what they have robbed both parents and children of, this relationship that is more valuable than anything. Your tombstone doesn't say he worked really hard at the office, right? They are robbing parents and children of the parent-child bond, and it's just it's unconscionable, frankly. And so my mission is to get as many people out of the institution as possible, because that is the real way for emancipation and for freedom to prevail. Right now, sending your child to school is putting shackles on them.
That's very powerful firsthand account of your family situation, because it shows that it's not just about a curriculum, it's not just about grades and advancing on to college. It's about the whole family dynamic. It's about the whole relationship that you have with your children.
Here's the thing, Cheryl. It's not just about curriculum or grades. Guess what? The most amazing part is it's almost not at all about curriculum and grades.
Right.
That's what I'm saying, is we have a completely distorted view of education. What is your highest aspiration for your child? Is it just that they earn a lot of money? Then put them in school. And by the way, there's still no guarantees. But if your highest aspiration for your child is that they become a productive individual who knows how to love people and serve others and be a productive member of their society and be married and have a successful marriage and family, then putting them in the school system is the worst thing you can do.
That's just such an amazing testimony to the power of your campaign. And samsorbo.com/underground education, is that the best website for people to visit?
Yeah, if they just go to samsorbo.com, all the information is there. All of my videos are there. You know, I also do a podcast, and you can find links for the Epic TV show, and where people contact me as well. So samsorbo.com gets you everywhere you need to go if you're at all interested in this. Even if you don't have children, if you're grandparents, or even if you're an aunt or an uncle, please come to the conference and hear what I'm saying, because we need to repair the damage that's been done. We need to start that now. And the reason I say that, Cheryl, is we can do all kinds of political maneuverings and machinations, and we can elect great people into office. But if we don't get the kids out of the public schools, we're going to lose it all in 20 years anyway, because we're creating a population of followers who follow directions and believe in socialism.
Yep.
And that in itself is anti-American.
Yep.
Also, there's a great documentary called Truth and Lies in Education, and you can go see it at truthandliesfilm.com. For a short time only, they've put it on the website. I think there's a small fee to watch it. It's a phenomenal documentary showing the degradation in our schools. Watch that, come to my conference and learn how to fix it, and let's save America.
Let's save America, indeed. We're only one generation away from losing it. So, Sam Sorbo, I love the work you do for America, for America's youth, and thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt. I really appreciate your time.
You're awesome. Thank you so much.
Go to the conference if you can, samsorbo.com, or watch it online when she live streams or posts the link to the conference. This is important stuff, even if you don't have kids, even if your kids are grown and aren't in the school system any longer. The next generation of leaders certainly are going to impact how you live your life, how your retirement years go. This is important to all Americans, whether you have kids or not, whether your kids are grown or not. Whether you believe fully in the public school systems or not, it doesn't matter. It's all about how the next generation is taught to think about America. And certainly this generation is not coming out of the public school system with any kind of love or admiration for America. In fact, just the opposite, hatred for America. Is that what you want in the White House? Is that what you want leading the country in Congress? Perish the thought. Thank you for listening. I want to remind you that if you like Bold and Blunt, you can download Bold and Blunt. You can subscribe to Bold and Blunt at edify.app/podcasts, at washingtontimes.com, or anywhere podcasts are offered. And I also want to remind you, lock down the socialist plan to take away your freedom. It's available now at all bookstores, online near you. Pick up a copy. The globalists do not want you to read this, because it is the playbook of where the left is going to platform the coronavirus and continue the fear in different avenues to justify ongoing lockdowns, ongoing government overreaches into liberties that should come from God, not government. Thank you for listening. Tune in next time, and in the meanwhile, stay blunt, stay bold.